Today's true story is, I rented my place to the Werewolf. Fear Zone, your horror channel. Good evening everyone, and now let's move on to today's story, which is about Mr. João, and it happened to him in the city of Saltinho, which is in Brazil, and at that time it was 1998, Mr. João was 48 years old. And today I'm going to tell you my story, in which I went to investigate something strange on my property and discovered something unbelievable, and I spent a dangerous dawn. And it all starts like this. I'm a farmer, one of whose main activities is raising chickens to sell, and I also live with my family on a ranch far from the urbanized area of the city, and as I have other properties near my neighborhood, I sometimes rent out one of my ranches for people to spend a few days or a season there. So, at a certain time of year, a guy would always rent out my place during the cane harvest. And so, this guy showed up and rented my place again. He claimed to be the supervisor of the cane cutters, and this man always came alone without any of his family. But apart from that, when he paid rent to me, this guy always bought 2 or 3 of my chickens. I was surprised at how this man had the courage to stay living on that ranch alone, because around that ranch there were only bushes, and at night that place was very scary, but this man said he felt very comfortable living on that ranch. One day, I had gone out in the afternoon to buy feed for my chickens, and the guy who rented my ranch went to my house to pay the rent, and as I wasn't there, he left the rent money for my wife. He also bought 3 chickens from my ranch. He left a message, that as his car was broken, he would come and pick up these birds the next day, as soon as he got back from work. The fact is, I arrived at my ranch in the evening and my wife told me all this, so I was wondering whether I should take these chickens now, or not until early tomorrow morning, to the guy who rented my ranch. Anyway, as he was a good payer, I decided to take his birds at that time, which was around 11 o'clock at night. So I took 3 chickens from my coop and put them in my car, and so I drove to my rented ranch, to deliver the chickens to my tenant. Arriving at the ranch, I looked through the gap in the property's iron gate, to see if my tenant was in the backyard. I started to call out to him, but to my surprise this guy ended up entering the house and didn't even pay any attention to me. Then he turned off the light in the yard, and everything went dark there, and I even thought he didn't hear me, but suddenly I saw this guy sneaking out of the house, and he went into the darkness in the yard, and then he disappeared around the back of the property. I waited for about 15 minutes, and as the guy didn't show up, I took a chicken in my hand, and went around the ranch fence, to get the tenant's attention, and try to deliver his birds. Well, I went around the side of the fence, and looked at the backyard of the ranch, but when I got to the back of the property, I saw something moving in the distance, and I ended up calling the tenant, but what happened to my amazement, is that that figure looked at me, and he came walking towards me, but I soon saw that it wasn't a man, and I got a fright, because it seemed to be the strange kind of dog. But its eyes were so bright that it seemed to be something very macabre, and at that moment I was frozen with fear, thinking about the danger I was going through. So I walked away and slowly turned back, but I kept watching the strange animal, but the creature didn't care. It came running towards me on all 4s, and it was certainly out to get me. And seeing the risk of being attacked by this beast, I left the chicken on the ground and started to run, but my car was in front of the farm, and I managed to get into my vehicle in time, but I think I was lucky that the animal didn't manage to get through the barbed wire of the property, and that prevented the creature from catching me. When I got inside the car, I looked at the ranch fence, and I didn't see that beast anymore. At that moment, I wondered what that animal was, because I wasn't sure if it was really a dog, because it seemed to be very big. But I was also afraid and worried that this animal was trying to attack my tenant, because he was alone in that place, and acting a bit strange, and it even looked like he was running away from something. Anyway, to try to help the guy, and as I was in the car, I started calling the guy, and it didn't take long, and that creature came running out of the bush, and tried to take me by surprise, because this beast got to my car quickly, and it got up and stood like a man, and this creature stuck its arms through the window of the vehicle to catch me. In my fright, I accelerated the car and managed to escape the monster's attack, and when I looked back through the car window, I saw that creature standing up and looking in the direction of my car, and of course, I already thought that it was certainly a werewolf, because it looked like a huge dog standing up, but its eyes were macabre and lit up, and it was balancing on just 2 legs. But anyway, this werewolf was on 4 legs again, and I started my car and left that place, because it was getting dangerous, and of course, I was very worried about my tenant, because I think he was acting strange, because he must have been hiding from the werewolf. The fact is, I got home, and I was thinking about calling one of my neighbors, and we'd go armed to the ranch, to try to help my tenant, and that maybe he would be taking a lot of risk, but I ended up leaving that plan there, because it was already dawn, and no one would wake up to make that run, and besides, there was still the risk of something going wrong, and this animal being able to attack me. However, I didn't sleep that night, just thinking about this damn werewolf. When daylight came, I drove with my neighbors to the ranch to check on my tenant. And what happened was that I passed by a few times and didn't see my tenant. I called him at the gate and no one answered, so an old redneck passed by walking down the street, and this gentleman told me that my tenant left very early in the morning, and that he went to his job at the sugar cane mill. But what happened was that this old bumpkin told me something strange, which left me with a lot of doubts. He told me that my tenant sometimes went into the woods at night with some chickens, and then sometimes he would show up at the ranch when he arrived during the day. The old Kaipira also said that he went into the woods a few times during the day, and he said that he had seen my tenant's chickens, all those birds torn to pieces, and it looked like some large animal had done it. At that point I began to suspect my tenant, but I didn't say anything about the werewolf to the landowner, because I wanted to hunt down and catch this werewolf by surprise. At the end of the afternoon, I drove past my rented ranch again, and that's when I saw my tenant leaving the property and closing the gate. He was carrying a kind of travel bag, so I stopped the car and we started talking, and his intention was that he was going to another house, and he said he had rented a house in an urbanized village until the end of the cane harvesting season. And he said that he couldn't live on my ranch anymore, because of a strange animal that started prowling around the property at night. He went on to say that the creature appeared when he left the house and ended up hiding in the bush, so as not to be attacked by that beast, but this guy denied that the animal was a werewolf. After this conversation, this guy gave me the keys to my farm, and then he drove off in his car. I left this story behind and went back to my house, and I never saw this guy again. I can't accuse him of being this werewolf, because even I wouldn't stay in that farm if a creature like that appeared. But it could be that he has some connection with this creature, because he could have been taking those chickens to feed the werewolf. And you, what did you think of this story? Could it be that the tenant was this werewolf? I'll comment on what you thought. Well folks, thanks for watching the video, and if you like this horror story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like.